When we think of the Vikings, what springs to mind? Horned helmets, savage raiders, ruthless invaders. But what if that picture only scratches the surface? In Vikings, a history, Neil Oliver guides us beyond the myth, into the real story of the Norse seafarers, their origins, their voyages, their culture, and their legacy. Today we follow his journey through the Viking Age, where it came from, who these people were, how they lived, and how their age ended. Turn the clock back to Scandinavia, modern Norway, Sweden, Denmark. For centuries before the Viking Age proper, these lands were home to farming communities, tribal societies, coastal fishing and trade. Oliver traces how the conditions, geography, climate, social organization, set the stage for something new to emerge: fast ships, daring voyages, encounters beyond the fjords. He asks, how did seafaring life evolve into raiding? Why did the Norse by the late 8th century leap out of Scandinavia in boats and menace the coasts of Europe? The setting matters. Rugged terrain, long winters, access to the sea, a culture that prized mobility. The Viking Age isn't a sudden explosion out of nowhere, but a transformation of a maritime society. He also introduces the idea that the Viking Age cannot be understood purely as economic pressure or population growth. Rather, Oliver emphasizes the confluence of external opportunity, weak coasts, monasteries vulnerable, and internal readiness. Boats, people, culture that gave the Norse the means and the motive. The first recorded blast from this wave. In 793 CE, the famous raid on Lindisfarne, the English monastery, a shock to Christian Europe. Oliver shows how this raid becomes symbolic, not simply plunder, but a signal of a new era. From that point, Vikings start projecting power not only as traders but raiders. Then the expansion accelerates. Across the Irish Sea, into the British Isles, up the rivers of Russia, along the coasts of France. Their longships carry them far from the Baltic to the Black Sea. They are at once fearsome, unpredictable, and versatile. Oliver paints the Vikings as more than one-dimensional. Raiders, yes, but also traders and settlers. They take what they can, yes, but they also establish footholds, integrate, adapt. The video might show maps of Viking routes, archaeological finds of longships, depictions of coastal raids. The point: this isn't just brute force, it's mobility and maritime advantage. But who were these people? What did they believe in? How did they live at home when they weren't off raiding? Oliver dips into Norse religion, Odin, Thor, the afterlife of Valhalla, social structure, chieftains, freemen, thralls, slaves, and material culture, longhouses, the longship, runestones, art. He emphasizes that the Viking Age is more than warfare. These were craftspeople, farmers, traders. They built houses, they built ships, they made jewelry, they carved runes. They also lived lives defined by the sea voyages, trade, settlement. But the image of Vikings purely as marauders has overshadowed this richer reality. Oliver invites us to see the full spectrum: the warrior and the merchant, the raider and the settler. Over time, the Vikings shift. They don't just raid and leave, they stay. Settlements in Iceland, Greenland, even parts of North America, though contested. Rivers in Russia become Norse trade routes. In England, the Danelaw forms. In France, the Treaty of Saint-Clair-sur-Serpe grants Norse leader land, Normandy. Oliver shows how this transition changes the Vikings, from outsider raiders to, in many cases, settled rulers and integrated members of European society. They adapt to local politics, they adopt Christianity in many cases, they build kingdoms. This is key. The Viking Age doesn't end with defeat or extinction, it ends with transformation. The Norse become part of the European fabric, including churches built by formerly pagan Vikings. Kings like Canute the Great, Canute, ruling England and Denmark. The Norse legacy factoring into languages and place names. What caused the Viking Age to wind down? Oliver highlights several factors: the increasing strength of European states and church institutions, the conversion of Norse leaders to Christianity, which changed the religious, cultural impetus, the internal changes in Scandinavian society, from chiefs to kingdoms, and the fact that raiding became less profitable or more dangerous. He argues that by the late 11th century, the classic Viking era is over. The longship raiders give way to settled Norse lords. The open seas still matter, but the priorities have shifted. The legacy remains strong. Norse art, language, place names, settlement patterns, genetic footprints, and the mythic image of the Viking in popular culture. Oliver invites us to see the Vikings not just as historical curiosities, but as important actors in the shaping of medieval Europe, as connectors between North and South, as innovators in sea travel, as settlers who brought new patterns of colonization and integration. A timeline showing peak of Viking raids to 9th-10th centuries, and gradual fade into assimilation, or montage of modern place names derived from Norse in the British Isles. So what's the takeaway? In Vikings, a history, Neil Oliver strips away the most sensational myths, horned helmets, constant pillaging, to give us a more nuanced picture. The Vikings as seafaring, adaptable, ambitious people. They were warriors and raiders, yes, but also traders, settlers, craftspeople, statue builders. They changed Europe. When you hear the word Viking, what do you picture? Maybe now you'll picture a longship cutting the North Sea, a settlement on a remote fjord, a runestone telling of a journey to Byzantium, or a Norse king ruling in England. The Viking Age was just a few centuries, but its ripple effects remain today. What surprised you most about the Vikings? Did you realize how wide-ranging their impact was? What's your favorite Viking story? If you enjoyed this dive into Viking history, hit subscribe for more deep dives into ancient civilizations, and drop a comment if you'd like a video on Norse mythology, Viking voyages to North America, or the settlement of Iceland. Thanks for watching.